my opening line got ruined. It looked like I was going to be up right before lunch. I was going to open with, "Are you hungry for provocation?" Now we're not hungry anymore. Hopefully you got a nap in there somewhere. It's good to have a break and get some rest. My name is Bill, and I feel like I'm starting an AA meeting. My name is Bill, and I'm really new to organizing.
Hi, Bill.
So I feel like I'm that guy who just finished, maybe basic training and shows up off the bus with his gear to a tent of a bunch of frontline soldiers who've been at the front line. You guys have been in the trenches, shoulder to shoulder with one another, and I'm really, kind of like that guy would be, a little giddy and excited always about the opportunities that I get over the last year and a half to be in a room with people like y'all and to learn from you and to learn with you. I'm a fairly idealistic person. I have a deep thread of idealism that runs through me and hope that is still alive, pretty beaten up, but still alive. And when I think about being in rooms like this and having a chance to learn with and from people like you, and I actually particularly, my hope is hung on the sovereignty, grace, and mercy of God. It's some of the few things I'm still certain about after 51 years. When I was 25, I was certain about just about everything. And now, and that's not a slam on being 25, that's just how I was 25. I was not, yeah. So now there's just a few things I'm still certain of, and the hope, the mercy, and the grace, the mercy, and the sovereignty of God is one of them. The second thing I hang my idealism, my hope on, is when I look around at your, particularly your younger faces. The people that are in this room, the people I've got a chance even to hear from so far, just the short time I've been here. The Roberts and the Wendy's and the Zachs and the Delantes and the number of you who are, when I just hear about what you're doing, it breathes life on my hope and idealism as well, about the kind of world I think God wants to make in partnership with us. So I say that because it's super important. I heard about putting this little talk together. It was, frame it in stories. And then when I read the word provocative presentation, wow, I'm a word nerd, so I got pretty excited about that. Provocative, I love that one. I like to be provoked. I like to provoke. I hope that there's a couple of points in here that do that. But in terms of story, there's a little bit about my story that's relevant to the story I'm going to tell about something we just experimented with called the Bay Area Clergy Cohort, which was something that Ben McBride, myself, and a couple others just executed that program over the last 10 months, wrapped up in September. But I want to start just a little bit because I don't know really anybody in this room, and none of you really know me, and I just want to take hopefully less than 60 seconds to give you a couple points of reference for what I'm speaking out of, because I think it's part of my story of formation. So I've been married nearly my entire adult life with 2 children. Son Joshua's 29, daughter Jordan's 26. And I don't know what I want to be when I grow up. So when you listen to my work history, that'll come through pretty clear. So I was a police officer for 6 years in my early 20s. I totaled my motorcycle on duty, was medically retired, running the full-time pastoral ministry, and ordained in the Vineyard Association of Vineyard Churches, a non-denominational Christian tribe. And so I did full-time pastoral work vocationally for 14 years, and pretty much every pastoral position that a leadership team can sit around and conceive of names for, how that goes. When I got to be about 40, I stepped away from paid pastoral ministry for a number of reasons. One of which was because there was this dissonance going on in me that has fueled a bit of a deconstruction over the last 10 years, mostly messy and unbecoming, but somewhat beautiful, with respect to trying to hold together the kind of gospel I was teaching and preaching and the kind of disciples I was investing in making over those 14 years, what that fruit looked like when it came to actually partnering with God to see the kingdom of heaven here on earth as it is in heaven. And I found that we were really good at handing out a ticket personally for eternity, but not really good, at least in the ministries that I walked in. We were grievously inept at equipping people with a thicker Jesus, a thicker gospel that talked about pursuing one another's wholeness, about shalom, about the kingdom, about God's passion for justice, and So that dissonance was part of why I stepped away. And so over the last 10 years, I've been trying to form and learn through catalyzing a number of different for-profit and not-for-profit organizations to do good, in these ways that I wish that the church should do more, and then just to bring as many and most diverse collaborative stakeholders together as I possibly could. Because I just wanted to practice this idea that with humanity as a common basis for us, we can work together instead of becoming really excellent at articulating on reasons why we can't work together. I wanted to prove and still want to prove that we can work together and do these kind of things that pursue one another's wholeness. And that kind of leads me to where I'm at now. This last gig that I was in is wound down, and last week I just got hired by Ben McBride to work for Pico, California. I've been working with Ben McBride for the last year and a half. I got my first Pico meeting under my belt in Nashville in January 2015, about 18 months or so ago. And that'll be part of where the story is rooted. But that's just a framework kind of for where I'm coming from. I want to talk to you about the Bay Area clergy cohort. It's a recent experiment. It was 10 months long. It was a diverse group of 40 to 50 clergy and institutional faith leaders in the Bay Area. And by diverse, I mean it was somewhat diverse. There were some areas of diversity we lacked. But as far as an experiment goes, we had Black, white, Latino, Asian members, not as many women as I would like to have seen, but we had some women present. We had some full-time vocational pastoral roles as well as parachurch ministry leaders and things of that sort. We definitely did not have enough diversity of age. I think everybody probably fell between 30, 35, and 50. And we did not have enough religious tradition diversity, in my opinion. It's almost predominantly Christian. And yet we have plenty of diversity within our Christian faith tradition. There was a lot of that diversity present in the room. And so those are the kind of people that gathered and committed to take this journey together. Two provocative points that I'd like to lift up for you guys to think about as I push through this. I think they're provocative. One, clergy and institutional faith leaders are still forming. And they can be reached. We are still forming and we can be reached. That's one point of provocation. Two, because otherwise we should just write them off. And there's half, I don't know if it's half of me, but I have my days where I'm just like, wow, no hope, But I'm here to talk about an experiment in which I feel like that's one provocative point. And the second one is that the theology of resistance that Michael Ray will talk a little bit more about in a moment is an outstanding catalyst to change theory in the context of contending for formation in clergy leaders. The theology of resistance is a good catalyst for change theory. I've just finished a 40-page report. I want to read it to you word by word. No, I literally did an evaluation, kind of nerding out. Yeah, on the spectrum of nerd to inspirational, I'm going to be leaning heavy nerd today. But it's because I just kind of finished this thing, and I just want to share some story with you that supports those 2 points of provocation. So I'm going to read a couple pieces of that because I think it does it in the most succinct way, and I want to start by just a quick clergy snapshot. I interviewed many of the clergy members after we were finished in depth about their experience and their formation, and I'm going to sprinkle in 2 or 3 of them intermittently through this. And I want to start with Bart Garrett, white brother in his 40s, pastors a large church in the Bay Area. They have 3 campuses. Christ Church East Bay is the name of it. He's the lead pastor. Evangelical Presbyterian Church. His seminary is a Reformed Theological Seminary in Orlando, Florida. In vocational ministry for 15 years, in the Bay Area for 11. I asked him, so much of our spiritual journey is about becoming, and we like to refer to this as formation. How are you different now? At the end of this cohort with one another, and I'll explain to you the components of it in a moment, but I just want you to get the fruit as we're going along. How are you different now as compared to before? Bart. I love the word woke and the phrase, I got Ferguson. They express the comprehensive effect the Bay Area clergy cohort had on me. This was a phrase they generated after being on a trip together with one another, and that's why I referenced it. My box of theological content has been dumped out. I can't pastor the same way as I pastored a year ago. I can't preach the same sermons as I did before. My wife and I can't spend money the same way as we did a year ago. We're building a small rental house in this little backyard that we have here in Oakland to make room for low-income housing. We'll rent it for under market value in the face of rising gentrification in Oakland. Just a snapshot of something that he was thinking and saying. So back to what are we doing here? One morning, early January 2015, while conducting a feedback session at Pico National Training in Nashville, a clear sense of frustration overcame the room of participants. We had hit a wall. We ached that the clergy and spiritual leaders in the nation would equally deem social justice work as sacred as handing out tickets to a heavenly afterlife. We were frustrated that more clergy and spiritual leaders didn't seem ready and responsive to contend for a full spiritual mandate that treated the correction of injustice and inequality as equally sacred work. We recognize we ourselves had been on a formation journey over the previous years that moved the needle of our own orthodoxy and orthopraxy around such civic engagement. We decided rather than being irritated they weren't where we thought they should be, we needed to meet them where they were in their orthodoxy and orthopraxy and start there with a relational commitment to their formation. Clergy and spiritual leaders have not been forming. Behind closed doors, many of them have admitted to me that they want to lead and teach more about the sacredness of reforming injustice and inequality, but they feel equipped to do so. Seminary had not prepared them. Church planting seminars had not informed or equipped them. Most of the faith traditions and pet doctrines that were handed down to them left them uninformed, unconvinced about contending for justice at the intersection of race, class, and faith. We became determined. A relationship-based cohort training format would be a foundational method of advancing clergy formation that results in civic engagement. So Reverend Ben McBride is the genesis and the primary catalyst of the notion of a Bay Area clergy cohort. It's because of him that we have one. He'd been building relationships with faith leaders in the Bay Area, and he, based on his reputation of being of caring not just about transactional endeavors with people, but in relationship and the formation of other fellow leaders in the area, was able to get 50 people to this thing. We had an average of 35 to 38 people consistently for 10 months, which is crazy to think about. So we offered it 9 monthly cohort-style training events on the second Wednesday of each month from 9 a.m. to 1 p.m., concluding in September of 2016. Participation for each session ranged from 40 to 50 leaders. We used high-quality venues in the city of Oakland that were well-designed and equipped for such training sessions. There were 3 pillars that ignited the clergy cohort. Faith leaders have big hearts, earnest desire to serve the people they lead. They're also very busy, overworked people. Persuading faith leaders that they will be well-served to commit over 100 hours of their time into training around faith-informed civic engagement is no easy task. But there are 3 main pillars that undergirded the invitation. 1, we will build your understanding around injustice. 2, we will invite you into a shared analysis and process. And 3, we will organize a network of relationships among you that enable you to do the work. Albert Hong is another quick clergy snapshot. Albert goes to New Hope Covenant Church. He's the associate pastor. It's an evangelical covenant church. His seminary is the American Baptist Seminary of the West. He's been in full-time vocational ministry for 6 years. How are you different now as compared to before? The BACC was the most significant formation experience of the entire year for me. Again, go to my point that these people are still forming. Mm-hmm. Transformational. And transformation I wasn't expecting. Spiritual formation was the focus of my graduate degree, he said. I'm being taken somewhere, though, that I didn't know I needed to go. Spiritual formation was mostly about practices like silence and prayer, etc., that one gives mental assent to. One chooses it. This was different. While I did choose to come and participate, I very much felt like I was being taken somewhere in formation I didn't really realize I needed to go. I'm recognizing what it means for the gospel to become enfleshed in me. We're all about incarnational ministry at our church, but now the ways we've been doing that felt based more on ideology than they did in deep, risky commitment, his words. Mm-hmm. The clergy cohort took me deeper into the theology of suffering. While at the Muni protests in St. Louis together, my pastoral bent wanted to care for those who were being disrupted, those I was present with, and I realized my theology has a bias for those who are around me. But now I'm developing a theology for those who aren't present. Fighting, being present and disruptive on behalf of the marginalized, I'm learning how disruption is an expression of love. Mm-hmm. So our change theory, we had a couple different points to our change theory. The theology of resistance was a key piece of that. It was the backbone structure to all of our sessions. And it was essentially a progressive sequence of encounter, disrupt, reimagine, and act. And it goes, if you like to nerd out on something, it's really, really good. So you're going to hear from Michael a bit more about that, but then get him in a separate conversation and just dive into that, the deep end of that pool. It's really good. But I'm here to provoke you to say that it's actually super efficient and effective at facilitating, catalyzing formation in people, particularly in clergy. There's a progressive sequence of encounter, disrupt, reimagine, and act. So I just want to read really quickly to you the 9 subjects that we went through. We had 9 sessions together. Get there. So the first one was called The Gospel According to Ferguson. And it was about understanding the moment that became a movement. In each of these sessions, we brought in high quality, and by quality I mean people close to the pain. So not just with big names and reputations, but people that could speak to the very close parts of the pain. But that first learning outcome was understanding the movement that became the moment that became a movement. The second was a broken system, understanding invisible power, producing visible pain. Third one was beloved community, learning outcome, understanding resistance empowered by love. The next one was mass incarceration, understanding proclamations and collaborative work on behalf of freedom for those unjustly imprisoned. Session 5 was urban violence, understanding how the violence and despair is challenging our communities. The next one was organizing, understanding how leaders and followers must change their orientation towards structural power and each other to join God's emerging world. The 7th one was implicit bias, understanding that we see race and faith in the ways we have been socialized to. Session 8, learning outcome, it was basically just this is our big one. It's a 3-day mobile learning lab in Ferguson. So we took like 20 people to Ferguson and did a mobile learning lab there and in St. Louis. As you can imagine, grand slam. I mean, the combination of sharing that time together and the kind of time we had together was powerfully transformational. Understanding the Ferguson hermeneutic by actually getting close in proximity to the pain and the local storytellers. And then we finished up with where do we go from here. Those are the 9 sessions. Bernard Emerson. Where are you, Bernard? Come back to you, buddy. So Bernard is a black brother in his 40s, pastoring up in Oakland. The church is the Way Church. He's the senior pastor. Affiliation, Converge Pac West, formerly the Baptist General Convention. Seminary, Patton Bible College, and Sacramento Theological Seminary. 18 years in vocational ministry. How are you different now than you were before? The cohort changed the way I look at Scripture, the way I understand Jesus. 18 years in vocational ministry, seminary degrees, late 40s, grown man who we want to write off because, not him personally, but you get the profile, right? I go, man, if you don't have it together now, right. It affected the way I understand Jesus. It changed it. Definitely the way I live out the gospel. We read Jesus' words, memorize them, and meet about them, but if we don't live them, it's a dead book. That's right. We now organize small groups around action shaped by civic engagement. You can't have a small group in my church without it being gathered around civic engagement built around justice, period. What are you doing now that you weren't doing before? I'm a ceasefire mentor in Oakland. I'm teaching a seminary course in San Quentin. And I'm mobilizing my church around body, ballot, and buck. I champion that every Sunday now, and I'm committed to the work around the HEAT campaign to reform policing. That's the difference in 10 months of a formative, relational-based commitment to formation of clergy leaders. It's powerful. Okay, let's wrap this up. So we see widespread appetite to have more clergy and congregational cohorts offered. There has been a strong adoption of the theology of resistance. By the time we were finished, all of these clergy leaders, they're using the language. And they're talking about how they're going to go back with their congregations and facilitate an encounter, a disruption, a reimagination, and then move their congregations to action around that transformative journey. There is readily observable evidence that dozens of participants recognize and embrace the challenge to be prophets of resistance rather than chaplains of the empire. That was our challenge to them in the first session. Will you be chaplains of the empire or prophets of a righteous resistance?
Good.
Answer the question. We see dramatic change in the practice of civic engagement as a means of expressing their spirituality. When asked to rate the amount of positive formation experience in the cohort, 1 being low, 10 being high, respondents averaged a response higher than 9 about whether or not they saw civic engagement as an imperative to an expression of their spirituality. Over 90% of the respondents indicate significant to major formation lead them to believe civic engagement around race relations, faith, and justice issues is a necessary expression of their faith and of the people they lead. Over 70% indicate significant to major formation around their theology, about the person and ministry of Jesus. Over 60% indicated significant to major formation around their theology about the church. As a result of the formation they've experienced in the cohort, 85% of participants indicate they now believe public demonstrations, voter mobilization, strategic use of finances, and community organizing are legitimate and even imperative expressions of their faith. Pastor Albert Hong reflects, I have not been confrontational. I've seen myself as a bridge builder, not a confronter. Now I'm learning how disruption is actually an expression of love. In significant numbers, these faith leaders feel empowered, equipped, and ready to influence their congregations with the theology of resistance. They're eager to work together. They have continued to be working and meeting with one another since we finished in September. There are numerous next steps. Any of you that are interested in this report, it's in a very rough draft for me right now, but in the next few weeks it'll be done. I noticed in our packet you have my email, and I'd be happy to share it with you. I would actually ask you that if you ask for it, that you please give me some feedback too. Tell me what your thoughts are about it, because we're just practicing experiments, right? We need each other for that. I'll end it. Clergy and spiritual leaders are not done forming. They're not done, and they can be reached. Our original premise that they can be engaged with formative initiatives where they are has been affirmed. With the cohort, we endeavored to build understanding around injustice and equality, invite faith leaders into a shared analysis and process, and organize them into a network of relationships for them to do the work together. A relationship-based cohort training format is a proven foundational method of advancing clergy formation, and it does result in civic engagement. We don't, I've got probably 15 super incredible stories to tell out of 50, so it's not like, miraculous. But in terms of, I've been practicing a lot of different things over the last 30 years. I was pretty excited about some of the traction, the transformational traction, not transactional. Difference between conformity and transformation, right? Yeah. So I'm going to have to watch. See, if you really want to know if it's transformation, we're going to be watching these guys' relationship, these guys and gals' relationship for years. And we're going to be constantly challenging them to action, which is something we did every session as well. Last one, Erin is a Asian sis and prison fellowship, field director for InterVarsity Christian Fellowship. Seminary is Fuller, 11 years in full-time vocational ministry. How are you different than compared to before? The clergy cohort was a place where my ongoing theology was being formed. Reverend Seku's teaching about theology was an area of formation for me. I'm now part of a broader network of organizing. I feel more clear about the importance of community organizing and how to do it. I participated and even helped organize the HEAT rally. HEAT is the acronym for hiring, equipment, accountability, and training. They're the ways that we want to reform our police departments into public servants we can trust. She helped put together a protest and a rally around that. She said, I've realized that I could participate. Not everyone needs to be the one with the bullhorn. I felt empowered when Ben invited me to speak, though. I didn't think I had much to offer. I learned I had something important to contribute to develop my voice. I'm learning how to lament and how important it is to sit in the pain and not to move through it too fast. Clergy are still forming. We're all a work in progress. They can be reached, and the theology of resistance is a powerful catalytic backbone to these types of formation. That's all. Toss it.